Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Elko, the Texas A&M Aggies, heading into a massive two-game stretch to close out the 2024 regular season. Now, we said earlier in the week that Auburn game on the road, yes, it's kind of a look-ahead spot as you have Texas at home the next week. That's also an Auburn team that I think is a much better football team than their record shows. And I look at that matchup and almost say I like that Texas A&M has to go on the road for that football game, because if you get that one at home, you might kind of have a sleepy crowd that's looking forward to the home matchup against Texas the next week. But anytime you go on the road in the SEC, especially a place like Jordan-Hare Stadium, you're probably not going to overlook that game like you might if you get them at home. Now, I think that Auburn game, if Texas A&M is as good as I think they are, I think they should go on the road and take care of business. Now the conversation is, how can we, kind of reach our peak with this Texas A&M team going down the stretch in 2024? There's a couple of different talking points that I want to get into. Now, before we get into it, as always, Texas A&M fans, I'd love to hear how we're feeling going into this Auburn game. I think it's a fascinating match. I think there's a reason there's only a 3-point spread in this football game. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into this one now. What I want this episode to be is, how does Texas A&M play its best football as two games of the regular season? I want to start with building this offense around Marcel Reed, which I think you're slowly starting to see Texas A&M do. And you look at the last 12 months for Texas A&M, obviously a brand new coaching staff when Mike Elko takes over. You're bringing Coach Colin Klein. You are building this offense in spring practice and fall camp around a quarterback like Connor Wigman, who's just a different kind of quarterback than what Marcel Reed is. Now, even when Marcel Reed was playing early in the 2024 season, I think always in the back of Mike Elko's mind that you're going to go back to Connor Wigman when he was fully healthy. And so I don't necessarily know if you made that full transition to the Marcel Reed offense, if you will, until it became pretty clear that Marcel Reed became the better quarterback that is going to give you a better chance to win football games. Now we're the last couple of games, I think you're starting to see that shift between this Texas A&M offense. I think most notably Coach Colin Klein, in terms of, hey, we got to cater this offense around Marcel Reed. He's a different kind of quarterback that excels at doing different things. These are the few things that really have stood out to me with Marcel Reed at the helm. One, you're really leaning into the run game, but more importantly, you're marrying the run game with the passing attack. Even going back to New Mexico State, and I understand that's a football game where you can't draw too much away from that game. Texas A&M just the clear better football team there, but you can kind of draw in terms of, hey, what are they trying to do with Marcel Reed in this Texas A&M offense? Because they obviously want to rep and become better at running the plays that Marcel Reed's comfortable with. A lot more play action. So not only are you leaning into the run game more with a quarterback like Marcel Reed, who's just going to open up this rushing attack more with his legs, you're marrying that run game, which you're running the football around 60% of the time. You're marrying it with an explosive play action passing attack. And what I mean by an explosive play action attack is, hey, we're going to run the football, force these safeties to come into the box. Marcel Reed, 43% of his dropbacks Saturday against New Mexico State were coming off play action. So they're really leaning into the play action game. And I think, secondly, they're really leaning into the deep ball. I think you probably know with Marcel Reed, this is not a shot at Marcel Reed as the quarterback. I think it's just probably the truth around this Texas A&M offense. You're probably not going to be a 75, 80% completion percentage offense with Marcel Reed at quarterback, right? You want to run the football and hit explosive plays. And I think Texas A&M knows that. So it's saying, hey, when we're going to throw the football, we're going to try to be damn explosive doing so. And so you take a look at Marcel Reed's average depth of target, almost 12 and a half yards, 22% of Marcel Reed's dropbacks and his throws traveled over 20 yards. And so what you're kind of seeing Texas A&M lean into is, yes, we're going to run the football, which makes sense for a couple of different reasons. One, I think this offensive line is better in the run blocking department than they are in pass protection. You run the football better when you have a quarterback like Marcel Reed running the offense. And I think, lastly, look, if we're going to run the football 60% of the time and bring safeties and linebackers closer to the line of scrimmage, let's go be explosive off of it. And that's kind of how you're seeing Texas A&M structure this offense, which I think is exciting for Texas A&M fans. The second thing in terms of how can Texas A&M reach their peak, Terry Bussey. I've seen a lot on the message boards and on Twitter about Terry Bussey potentially getting some reps at running back, and I'll be the first one to say I wouldn't hate it. You know, you look at Terry Bussey. Why did we all love Terry Bussey coming out of high school? It wasn't because there was a clear position he was going to play. You weren't really sure what position he was going to play, but we all knew he's a premier playmaker on the football field, and he's probably at his best with the football in his hands. And I was kind of surprised. I know a lot of Texas A&M fans were saying, "Hey, coming out of the bye week, can we see Terry Bussey maybe get a little bit of action at the running back position?" I think it almost makes sense that you didn't see that. If Texas A&M was going to go to Terry Bussey at the running back spot at least a few times a game, why would you do that against New Mexico State? I think secondly, it makes sense to me. One thing worth noting, Reuben Owens potentially returning, listed as, I believe, doubtful on the Texas A&M injury report. Okay, he probably won't be back for the Auburn game. Does that mean there's a chance that Reuben Owens can be back against Texas? That's certainly something worth monitoring. I'm not going to hold my breath there, but I think it's certainly worth monitoring. The reason I'm kind of making the argument for Terry Bussey getting just a few reps at running back is, look, Amari Daniels has been really good, and he was kind of like the RB3 coming in. And obviously, Reuben Owens goes down, and then Le'Veon Moss goes down, and Amari Daniels kind of thrusted into that running back one role, I should say. I think he's run the rock really well. I've been really impressed with Amari Daniels all year, even when Le'Veon Moss was healthy. Now, the drop off between Amari Daniels to EJ Smith, I think is pretty significant. When you went to Le'Veon Moss and then to Amari Daniels, there wasn't that big of a drop off. Le'Veon Moss maybe a little bit more aggressive, downhill, more physical, but in terms of running back production, there wasn't this crazy drop off. I do think there's a little bit more of a significant drop off from Amari Daniels to EJ Smith, and that's not a shot at EJ Smith. I just think it's true. Because you have such a significant drop off, and you probably don't want Amari Daniels taking 25 carries a game, can you spell Amari Daniels with just a few reps with Terry Bussey, especially in some of those outside zone concepts where you're getting Terry Bussey in space and kind of allowing him to just be a playmaker and pick through traffic, make people miss? Going back to Terry Bussey, he's an elite athlete, but he's at his best when he has the football in his hands. Can we dial just, 5 to 6 run plays? I'm not saying Terry Bussey needs to come in and take 15 plus carries, but we all know he's not going to be a bell cow running back. Can you get creative with him? I think that's a storyline that's certainly worth mentioning. So you look at this Texas A&M team and say, all right, this offensive line has clearly been better than what we thought it was. They're building this offense around Marcel Reed, which I only think it continues to get better as he gets more experience and as Colin Klein gets more comfortable calling this offense. If you can inject Terry Bussey as this, just potential difference maker who can, legitimately change the game with one touch, I think that's really intriguing. Now, you go over to the defensive side of the football. This is, I think, the bigger storyline. And arguably, I should have started with this off the top. I think this defense has and Texas A&M fans, I think a lot of y'all have been rocking with the fellas back to when I said Texas A&M is going to be a top 5 defense that we see in the country. I don't think they've been a damn good, solid defense. There's no arguing that. Can they reach that top 5 defense that I think we know they're capable of? That's worth mentioning and monitoring. What does that look like? What needs to happen? I think it starts with this team just doing the small stuff right. You go back to that South Carolina performance, an ugly performance. It had a lot more to do with, we know you got the players. You got NFL guys at all 3 levels of this defense. You got to start doing the small things right. Like when you have the ability to go make a negative play, you got to bring down the quarterback. When you have a chance to make an open field tackle, you got to make that open field tackle. When you are fitting the run, you got to fit the run the right way. That South Carolina performance on defense, which was no doubt ugly, that was a result of this defense just not playing clean, disciplined football as opposed to not having the dudes. That's a good spot to be in. A lot of I'm a Michigan fan. I want this Michigan offense to get better. Well, it's too bad we don't have the guys for a good offense this year, especially not at quarterback. So there's no real hope. If you're a Texas A&M fan, like there's a lot of hope that this Texas A&M defense can get better during the down stretch of this 2024 season because you got the guys to be an elite defense. Now it's got to go happen. I think this is a fascinating team. You're sitting here, 15 in the college football playoff rankings with, that pseudo. You're in the college football playoffs right now. You know what I mean? You beat Auburn, and then you beat Texas. You're in my opinion a lock to the college football playoffs. If that's not the case, I think we all riot. You're essentially starting your college football playoff run now on the road against Auburn, which is a game you can't overlook. I think a lot of people say the college football playoffs start next Saturday against Texas. That's a playoff game. This starts now, though, because this is an Auburn team that can certainly win a football game if you don't play your best football on the road. Can they reach their peak? Can they play their best football 2024? If these three things happen, I think they can. Fired up for this game Saturday night. Certainly fired up for the Texas game in 10 days now. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.